podcast. Together, we accelerate America to be one nation under God again. I'm Andy. My wife Jen is doing the production engineering today, and the reason for that is because we actually have a lot of stuff that we want to talk about today. There's so much going on. I've been really excited about this particular episode for a very long time, and the things that we're going to talk about in this episode today. One, we're probably going to be at this for a little while, so I don't know how long this is going to be, but we're probably going to be at it for a little while. But the things we talked about that we're going to talk about in this episode today was really my inspiration on the timing of starting a podcast, like right now, right? There's some really exciting things that you may not have heard about, and I hope that, but I hope that together you're inspired to take greater action and be much more active in your faith in the public spaces, because that's what it's really all about. Now is the time. Now, we've said this before on the podcast, but now is the time for this generation of families to declare for this time that we are one nation under God. We join a long legacy of courageous families that have declared for their time and their generation that we are one nation under God. And it is truly families that make America, and it starts with courageous families like you and me, your family and ours that invite God into our national identity. So last time we talked about how there's these these patterns in history and stuff, and now is our generational time and things like that. Well, I found out recently that via the Liberty Institute, the Supreme Court has made some changes to massive precedences that really recognize rights that have always been there but have been interpreted incorrectly. And so with a correct interpretation, this really opens the door, not just for new features and functions of different ways that we can operate, because we don't ask the government for permission. We give the government permission to restrict our behaviors. And so I want to go to, I actually want to, let's have our, okay, let me tell you what I'm talking about here. First of all, as we all know, Roe v. Wade, Roe was overturned months ago. What that does is it pushes the abortion decisions down to the states, right? Now, it's important to recognize like how that works, because we're going to come back to that later on. The second thing that's also important is affirmative action, basically the DEI stuff for colleges. That's been deemed by the Supreme Court as non-constitutional, so that restricts people's ability to act, to get into schools. And so that's important. I think that's monumental, because although we're not going to be diving into the details in that one today, that one's monumental because it's a push against diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's really discrimination, it's a discriminatory policy. It's a reverse discriminatory policy. We'll get into that one probably in a different episode. But there's a couple of them that I wanted to jump into today, but they all kind of play into each other. School choice. There was a school choice case that was brought up in the Supreme Court via the Liberty Institute, and that had to do with school choice in Maine. And basically what's going on with that is that if there's a government program that is that has a benefit for a general benefit that schools or anybody can take advantage of, now the government can't discriminate against religious institutions. And so we'll dig into that in a little bit, but they can't discriminate in schools or in any other government. If the government money is available for programs generally, right, then the government can't restrict against things that have a religious bend. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but that one's a big one. That's a huge one. That's a precedent change. And then religious freedom in the workplace. So this is the Gerald Groff, Sabbath day postal worker. The Gerald Groff was a postal worker, and he was trying to get Sunday off. We'll dive into his history because he's a really, really amazing person. But he was trying to get, the Sabbath day off, and he was fired for it, right? Well, that's come back as a major precedent again has changed. And it's this 50-year precedent that's changed, and that's really opened up a whole lot of things. Not just, hey, they need to accommodate for Sabbath day adherence, right? It's actually wider than that. And I think the biggest one that we have is Lemon. Now, this is the Coach Kennedy case, the Coach Kennedy kneeling thing, where Coach Kennedy was, kneeling at the 50-yard line at the end of a high school football game, at the end of consistent high school football games, and he was let go for that, right? So this addresses religious expression in a public place. But what's interesting about all of these cases is, as we'll kind of listen to, and as we'll unpack today, when you dive into not just what the ruling is, not just where the Supreme Court fell, and how they fell, 5-4, 7-2, etc., 9-0, some of them, but what the opinion is. Now, when we think opinion from the Supreme Court level, it's more than just an opinion, right? It's more than that's a very light word if you don't know what that means. It carries a lot more weight than just, it's their opinion. Like, no, this is the way that they're interpreting the law, right? It's the way that they're saying, stop making bad laws, please, right? Because this is the way that we see it. Okay, this is the way the Constitution is. So stop making laws that look like this, right? And so it's important to understand that, like, kind of how those things work. And it's also really important to wrap your head around. And it's kind of tricky because when you're looking at it, you want to ask a bunch of different kinds of questions, but wrap your head around the fact that when the Supreme Court recognizes a constitutional right, that it's no longer, the ability for us to then ask the question, well, what can I do that I couldn't do before? It's really more about now the government doesn't have the ability to restrict activity around an entire topic, right? And so it doesn't mean that you can do specific things. It means that the government can't restrict from doing a variety of different things and a variety of different things that you may not even know about. So the purpose of today's discussion is really to hopefully inspire to fill in the gap, because God is really opening so many doors for us to walk through, right? So let's start with the first one, and I actually have it on the last part of my notes. So I'm going to be flipping around a little bit, so I apologize if we're kind of going back and forth a little bit. But Kelly Shackelford was on the Dinesh D'Souza podcast, I think the 10th of this month, the 10th of June, so this is last month. And Kelly Shackelford is the president and CEO of Liberty Institute. And so after a couple of things came through, he went and he did his media route, one through the Dinesh D'Souza podcast, another one through Grow Leadership. We'll talk about them in a little bit. And there's another clip we're going to show from Kelly Shackelford here in a second. But Kelly Shackelford, like I said, he's the president of the First Liberty Institute, and he argues a lot of cases in front of the Supreme Court. The First Liberty Institute is a nonprofit organization, is a nonprofit legal organization that gives legal representation for First Amendment religious liberty cases, right? And so there's a big long history there. And we're too small right now to have him on the podcast. I mean, we haven't put everything out there yet, so maybe we'll have him on the podcast later on. It would be fantastic to have a chat with him about some of these things. But he's been arguing in front of the Supreme Court, or at it all through the court system for a very long time. Very talented. and he brought this up the other day. So we're gonna start with this one. So let's go with Dinesh 1.
And so we did. And we won the case 7-2, but 5-4, 5 of the justices refused to follow Lemon for the first time. And it was really a sort of a crack in the armor. But I told our staff, it's going to take us maybe 10 or 15 years to get this thing drug into all the other areas like schools and everything else and stop Lemon. And 3 years later, there we were with Coach Kennedy at the Supreme Court. And we were like, there's never been a case at the Supreme Court on the rights of either teachers or coaches and their faith at school. So if we go for the get rid of Lemon grand slam, it might lose our case because we're too aggressive. So we didn't push that argument. Midway through the oral argument, out of nowhere, all of a sudden, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch start saying, I think it's time we get rid of Lemon. And we're just standing there shocked. I mean, our eyes are as big as silver dollars. Can't believe that this discussion is going. And surely enough, in the
wait, let him finish it. I'm sorry.
Opinion, just right at the beginning, they say Lemon is gone.
Okay, Lemon's right there. Just pause it for a second. We're going to come back to that. So first of all, that's extremely important. I would love to break that open with him, have a conversation. But right there, they're in the moment of the opening arguments, and Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, they're not even done with the opening arguments, right? It's not the statements or anything, but it's not the opening statements or anything, but they're not even done presenting the opening arguments. And Kavanaugh and Gorsuch just start having this conversation about, maybe we should get rid of Lemon, like as though it were just out of the blue, right? Remember last time we talked about how, God inspires and people listen, right? This case ended a 9-0 decision, if I'm not mistaken, right? 9-0 ultimately when it was done, right? So Lemon's gone, right? And it was a massive surprise. I mean, you heard him say it was a massive surprise when they're like, whoa, wait a minute, wait, like, what's going on here, right? Like the highest court of the land. And they just go, yeah, I think we should do that. Yeah, I think we should do that. This reminds me of 1948 when people just started saying "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance because they thought it was a good idea, right? And then 1863 when Abraham Lincoln says "under God" in the Gettysburg Address because he didn't write it down, but he was just inspired to say, this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom. And then all the other inspirational things that we see all throughout history. This is that moment, right? This is that moment, right? So this is definitely an inspirational moment, and that's the thing that honestly got my attention, is that this wasn't something that was done and then we waited for everybody to talk about it and all that other stuff. This is something that happened during the argument, and it was a surprise. And it was Kavanaugh and Gorsuch went back and forth going, yeah, let's do this. Yeah, let's get it. Okay, you can stop talking. We're done. We don't have to talk anymore. That's not exactly what they went through, but that was basically the idea, basically being that it was out of the blue. So let's continue the rest of the story here. But that story by itself that part of the story by itself, I think, is very significant.
It's over. That is 50 years, 7,000 citations. Best way I can describe this is, one of my guys came in the office, and one of my more aggressive attorneys, and said, I need $20 million. And I said, what do you mean you need $20 million? He said, we've got to go into every community, open every one of these cases. So everywhere that crosses went down, they come back up now. Everywhere that 10 commandments are in the closet, they come back out. Everywhere that prayer was taken out, it comes back in. And I said, no, I'm with you. But this is not us taking back the country. People now in their own communities can take back their country. We've already won. They just need to know that they now have the freedom that they didn't know they have now to bring all these things back, to restore faith in America across the landscape. And so I see it, Dinesh, as almost the opposite of like Antifa tearing down statues. This is putting it back up of who we are. And it's a major shift. It's a 50-year shift in the law. It's in favor of religious freedom and religious expression in public. The limit is the government can never coerce anybody with regard to religion. But this idea that they have to shut down all religious activity is over. And so the things that people have been trained for 50 years that they can't do, like have a nativity scene or have a prayer at the school board meeting or that's all over. That's all protected now.
Hallelujah.
And people just don't know it. So it's just it's the opposite. We're always on defense. This is offense. We've already won. It's just a matter of people in their own communities taking their communities back.
I mean, wasn't
right,
the
so
key?
Let's pause it right there. So first of all, there's a lot that was said there that's just absolute miracles. Okay, now the next conversation we're going to get into with Kelly Shackelford, kind of with Grow Leader, they kind of open that up and give them a little bit more space to talk all about it. But I hope that hit you as much as it hit me, because that means that we have been in think about how much we've been in the frame of wherever government is, religion cannot be, right? So school boards, city councils, town halls, school, the street, wherever government is, you cannot have your religion. And there's more to say about that, but a precedent change, especially a Supreme Court precedent change, is massive, because it just it takes a look. It says the way that we're looking at the law, not just the law, but the way that we're looking at the way that we're looking at the law, the way that we're looking at the right of the law, is now shifted. So now we no longer recognize that the government has the permission to restrict our activities, right? Our actions, right? And yes, it does have to do with the specific. Yes, it gives permission essentially, but it doesn't grant permission. It says that the government can't restrict those particular activities, but so much more, right? In the opinions that they write, it's so much more expansive than just saying, "Hey, Coach Kennedy can kneel now. It's okay. Coach Kennedy can kneel down and pray now." Like, no, it's so much more than that. So, let's jump now into. Yeah, my notes are a little bit all over the place. I really, really like this because I'm so excited about it. Let's jump now into Grow Leader. Now, Grow Leader is an institute that helps churches and missions grow in their leadership. Church planting and things like that. The podcast is actually really great. They've got a lot of great people on it. It's a great resource as well as First Liberty Institute. So let's jump into that and let's start it. Yeah, right about where you are. Go ahead.
That is, well, it's never happened in the history of our country. Precedents that have been in place for 50 years, really sort of suppressing religious expression, are all being overturned. I mean, we just overturned one. I think we're about to overturn another one this term that we're just arguing here in April.
In front of the Supreme Court.
Yes, in front of the Supreme Court. We won. The best way to put it is, there were 8,000 requests to the Supreme Court last year. They took 67 cases. Okay, so your chances of getting them to take your case, not good. If my goal had been for us to have 2 cases at
Okay, I think I started it a little bit late, so we're gonna leave it, but I think you can leave it exactly where it's at. I think I started it a little bit late, but Kelly says, Kelly Shackelford says, God is doing something in this space. He's been doing it for 30 years. He's doing something. I think my timing that I queued up there was a little bit wrong. The timing, or sorry, he's been doing this for 30 years, protecting, fighting for religious liberties for 30 years, and something is happening now, right? We're overturning 50-year presidencies, days apart from each other, right? Like, he fights for Maine, and then 6 days later, he gets in and wins against or wins on Coach Kennedy, right? And then he gets in and wins against like multiple ones, and so that they're changing a lot very quickly, and it's happening now. And so what that means is that the American people, families, have the ability to walk through. So we're going to listen to the rest of this, but I think I cut off the beginning. I apologize for that. Let's keep going.
Supreme Court, I'd be a fool. It doesn't happen. And but last year we didn't have 2 cases. We had 2 wins
at the Supreme Court within 6 days of each other.
I want you to talk about those. Talk about the Maine school choice. Talk about Coach Kennedy. Of course, that was the famous one that everybody knows about. Tell us some of these stories.
Well, it just shows you how something dramatic is happening and how everything is shifting in a really positive way for religious freedom in the midst of all this darkness. The Maine case, school choice cases, Maine has for over 100 years, most of their school districts don't have public schools. So they've always allowed the parents to take the money and to pick any public or private school they wanted. But then a few decades ago, they decided they would change that, and they would say, well, we're going to add one restriction. You can't pick a school if they teach anything religious. And so for instance, you could teach everything exactly like the other school, but if you have one class on your faith, you're out. Well, we said you can't do that. That's unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court agreed with us, 6-3. And so most people
for Liberty Institute
know that we won this major school choice case, but that's what they see it as. And it is big for that alone, right? I mean, everywhere in the country right now where there is a school choice program, you cannot exclude the Christian schools.
Hallelujah.
That is unconstitutional. So there are a lot of places now where churches can form schools because there's now resources that, people can pick. So that's a big deal on that alone. But it's so much bigger because the basis of the decision wasn't schools. The basis was what the court said was whenever there's a government program that provides benefits in a generalized fashion, you can never exclude the participants because of their religion, the fact that they're using them in a religious way, all that. So that is much broader. That affects, drug rehab and homeless missions. And so every church, every, teen challenge, every group that's out there that it wants to take on these societal ills and participate in these programs, but with a Christian perspective, they now can't be stopped and they have to be treated just like everybody else. And so very significant what that precedent's going to mean. But the even bigger one is the Coach Kennedy case, which we...
Okay, so I wanted to stop here because first of all, this is opened up my eyes to a lot of reasons why you wouldn't see these things anyway, right? Like the reason why you wouldn't see. I've got friends from other countries and things, and some of them are much more friendly to. Interestingly enough, they're a little bit more friendly to religious institutions doing things, and the state sponsors them in a variety of different ways. And so to see that government programs were restricting the participation because of religious use, right, is just ridiculous. You're like, well, wait a minute, like we get one class in there, and now we get one class about that has to do with anything religious, and now where we don't get the funding that we were supposed to get, so therefore our resources are gone just because we have a religious use to it. So this opens the door for a wide variety of activities that are in the realm of the possible, right? In the realm of possible, whether it's missions or private institutions that have religious bends, to now be able to use money from use funding or resources that are set for a general use case, so this concept that wherever the public is, religion cannot be, that's gone, right? And it just means a variety of different things. The government can no longer restrict participation in programs from those that have a religious use or a religious tendency or a church. So now churches can create more schools, churches can create more programs and still take advantage of public dollars, right? Or public resources that they didn't have before. That's massive. That is huge. It is, because you can just, now you have the ability to do a variety of different things because the right is recognized in that way. And whether it's, and again, he was talking about just a variety of different things. You can invite God into your business, into your program, into your school, into your mission, into your whatever, and take advantage of and still be able to take advantage of whatever program you would otherwise be leaning on, right? And so that's just like that's massive. It's massive. It opens up the doors for just a massive variety of different things. Again, this is the ability to invite God into our national identity. Let's keep going. This one we're going to take a little time on, guys. Like I said, this is we're going to take some time on this episode. It's really important to at least me. Let's go.
We won 6 days later than we won the school choice case, and
stop right there.
I think most people know Coach Kennedy.
He says so much in a short period of time. I should really just shut up. But the lead up to this was the main case was won, and then 6 days later, Coach Kennedy was won by the same company, right? So First Liberty does Maine school choice, which opens up the door for really government programs, right? And then within days, he wins Coach Kennedy, right? This is God, right? There's nothing else that's going on here. That's never happened, period. There's no other company or legal representation of anything that has gone to the Supreme Court and then won twice in a row within days. Like, I'm happy to see, somebody show us where that's happened, but no, so that's absolutely a miracle, guys. It's amazing. Let's keep going.
Was fired because after the games, he made a promise to God that when everybody was milling around the field and making reservations for dinner and all this after the game, he would go first. The first thing he does is he goes to the 50-yard line, goes to a knee, and thanks God for the privilege of coaching the young men. And he was told, if you do that again, you'll be fired. Well, he lost for 7 years in litigation until we won at the Supreme Court. And most people know we won, and that Coach gets to go back to coaching, which he is. And this fall, he'll at the end of the game, he'll go to the center of the field. We have an injunction that they cannot in any way stop him, punish him, do anything. I bet there'll be 1,000 TV cameras, Chris, there for that prayer when he goes to a knee.
That's so awesome.
In fact, we're going to try to do a movement, which people will hear about later, of really trying to tell everybody in the country that Friday to go to a knee with Coach.
Yeah.
Because we want to really begin to help people understand things are changing, and that you can take back your own communities.
This is something that that I keep thinking about. When the children of Israel, left Egypt, the children of Israel could leave Egypt, but Egypt never really, it has a really hard time leaving the children of Israel, right? And Kelly's going to talk a little bit about this. We'll talk a little bit about kind of the opportunities that God is opening up. But one of the things that I'm concerned about is in the religious community anywhere, right? The bucket of people that would say, like, well, let's not get excited, like, hang on, let's not get too far, because we don't want to, show people that we are, show people our religion, or show people that, we pray, or let's not do this for the praise of man. It's like, guys, we're not doing it for the praise of man, okay? Like, this is a massive precedent change. And God really is pleased when we are able to invite him into our identity, which was in our identity before 50 years ago. Again, 1954, the President of the United States invited God into our national identity by officially putting a law in that says our Pledge of Allegiance says one nation under God, indivisible, right? We invite God into it. We have national prayers. We have chaplains a paid chaplain at Congress. We have, like, God is in our national identity. We don't need to, our religions, each of our denominations, our religions will teach us how to practice what we should be preaching. That's great, right? Absolutely. Your religion teaches you how to practice what you should be preaching. That's awesome. My religion teaches me the same thing too. But what we ought to be doing is telling people not that we, not preaching what we practice, not like I preach, I practice differently than you do, but preaching that we practice, right? We really ought to be showing others that, our biblical standards, Christianity, Judeo-Christian values are what we practice. We ought to preach that we practice, right? And not shy away from it, because this whole framework of this Lemon law, this Lemon case, right? And it's not the Lemon law of cars and all that stuff, buying a bad car or anything. But this is this Lemon precedent, in my mind, has really set up this environment that says, you ought to be ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Right? Just think about that for a second, because if anywhere in a public place you cannot show your religion, period. Right? And realistically, this has always been an attack on biblical Judeo-Christian values. Right? It hasn't been about everybody else. It's been about specifically, Judeo-Christian religions. It's been about suppressing the Bible, right? And I'm sure people older than I am could talk about, the 60s and, all that other stuff. But this has been absolutely about keeping God and Christ out of our national conversation, right? This precedent flips that, and now it can come back. So to say that, like, oh, hey, we ought not to, you don't need to go with Coach Kennedy. I mean, let him do his thing. He's there to catch it. He's not. Okay, he's not there to get attention. It is important for us to be able to support and be able to say, hey, look, whether or not I show up with Coach Kennedy or not, I'm still going to be inviting prayers into my town hall. I'm still going to be inviting prayers into my city council, into my school board meetings, because I can, and I want to invite God into those meetings. I want to invite God into my national identity. I want to not just show God, but rely on God. And I want to invite my neighbors to pray with me, because we both believe, we both need it. We both absolutely need it. So, it's huge to be able to say God is opening a door here. So I'm getting a little further ahead of him, because I'm going to probably restate the same things in a couple seconds. But let's continue on.
Can't express your faith. There's lots of things people think they can't do that they can. So that was significant, and that's great. But it's actually a lot bigger than that. There's a case in the Coach Kennedy decision that is 50 years old. It's called Lemon. I think God knew what to name it. It's a lemon. And it is what has been used to sort of suppress religious expression in public for 50 years. We have an establishment clause, which said the founders didn't want there to be a nationally established church. And what happened is 50 years ago, the court said, no, we think that means a lot more than that. And it means separation of church and state, which means wherever government is, religion can't be, which is a way to push religion to the corners of society. We think that if you're offended by religion, you can bring a lawsuit, which you can never bring lawsuits just because you're offended. And it just opened up all this stuff that we've seen our whole lives, right? Nativity scenes coming down, menorahs coming down, Ten Commandments under attack. Any sort of religion at school by students or whoever else, everybody is in a panic.
You're right. You did talk about menorahs coming
why?
down.
Because any of that's in the Constitution? No. Because of Lemon. And it's been cited 7,000 times. Well, in the Coach Kennedy case, we overruled it. It was reversed. It's over. So all the crosses that went down, they go back up, right? All the 10 Commandments that got pushed into the closet, they come back out. All the things that people have been taught for 50.
Right. So, let's let him finish his thought. All the people that
50 years just got flipped.
Okay, there you go. So all the things that we've been taught for the past 50 years, like I was born in the Lemon world. Let's just put it that way. Okay, the legal interpretation, the Lemon legal interpretation, right? And so when we think about paradigm shifts, right? When we think about like these massive idea shifts, there's going to be a lot of, I think actually a lot of pushback where people are going to go, whoa, wait a minute. Now, the first question that people are going to ask is for sure, well, what can I do that I couldn't do before? Right? Well, what should I do? I mean, should I do anything else? You know, I was living fine. We were able to do it without it. So why shouldn't I continue to do things in the name of tolerance and understanding and patience and love? Why shouldn't I continue to do those things? Why shouldn't I continue to suppress my religion or suppress my faith because I want to be tolerant of others, don't I? That's what we've been talking about for 50 years, and God wants me to be tolerant. So there's this whole framework of being ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that we've wrapped ourselves up in these lies, and even a lot of our faith frameworks that we've wrapped ourselves up in that have just flipped. And it's happened now from the way that we interpret, working on the Sabbath, right? Which, I guess did we talk about that already? A little bit. We talked about that a little bit. Okay. To the way that we, to the way that we're looking at now religion in public places. So religion in the workplace, religion in the public places. There's again, for 50 years, we've said it's okay. It's okay that it's not there. I mean, it's fine. God doesn't need me to be there. It's fine. And we've justified our way out of that. And that's the thing that to me, that was just like, wait a minute, we shouldn't have been fighting against this. Again, he said that the lemon was cited over 7,000 times over a 50-year period. Should that have been like 1,000 times a year? Probably not. But like, should that have been more because we should have been pushing against it so much, so vehemently? Because, if we were able to do it, if it was a right the whole time, what is our expectation? If it was a right the whole time, what were we really responsible over? As you can tell, like the mindset that I have is that when God gives us a republic, when God gives us a democracy, when God gives us government that we control as citizens, it's my understanding that he puts the responsibility for us to maintain that control, for us to maintain him in the identity of that country, in the identity of that government. And so when we allow suppression to come in, that's on us. It's not on the politicians. It's not on the pastors. It's not on the people in charge, because we are the ones in charge. Okay. So we have an opportunity now to go through this massive door of things that have absolutely changed and completely opened up. So, to answer that question, like, what can we do now that we couldn't do before? We don't ask permission from the government. It's not about that. The government no longer has the permission to restrict our behavior in that regard, like in that full regard. So, I've just got so many notes. I'm just really, really excited about this, guys. So let me get rid of that page. Right. So it's not so much about, the difference between when we're talking about the Supreme Court changes, we're not talking about the differences in a government program or in the way that a law changes, right? It's not a law that changes. It's the way that you look at the law that changes. So we don't need to look at the government like, well, what can we do now? Like, as though we're requesting permission, right? Rather, we create the restrictions. And I think that's very significant. We're the ones that create now the religious restrictions, right? And so there better be a whole new reason for us to create new religious restrictions. And that will happen now that it's been opened up. It's our responsibility to keep them as open as possible, to invite God in as much as possible without coercion, right? But keep God in those spaces, because we create the restrictions, right? So it's finding out what we can do, right? It's up to you, it's up to me to invite God in now, because he's welcome, right? And that's pretty much what the Supreme Court is changing for us, is the ability not just to say, hey, well, now you can do this, as though we're being given permission. We're getting rid of, the Supreme Court is saying that the government no longer has permission to restrict our behavior, right? So let's continue.
And so the problem is that most people aren't aware of this. And most people don't know the power and the freedom that they have. And I've got lots of little analogies in my mind, but one of them is, it's like there's an enemy castle and God just blew a hole through the wall, and we're all standing at the hole going, wow, look at the hole. You know, we need to go through the hole. It's like we're always complaining because we're always reacting to what the enemy is doing, right? And everybody's always saying, why don't you go on? This is offense.
Wow.
Okay, we've already won. It's just a matter of people taking the ground the Lord has already won for them, right?
Let him finish.
You can have a prayer at the school board meeting. You kids and everybody can pray after the football game, right? You can have a nativity scene at Christmas. There's all these things that people go, no, wait, we can't do that. Yes, you can. We just flipped all of this. And again, this is just the beginning.
Pause it right there. Yeah, that's a good spot. Yeah, so in my mind, it's not just like a castle that's opened the doors, right? But this is the parting of the Red Sea, right? This is our Red Sea moment, right? God is opening He's opened the Red Sea. There's literally a wickedness awoke right behind us that would rather just pummel over the entire the entire Christian community, and to just all of biblical values, period, and just rather destroy all of them than keep them, right? God's parted the Red Sea for us, and I think that there's really we have the ability to go through it, right? I'm concerned that there's really going to be like 3 ways that people can look at it, right? The first one is those that see the opportunity right now and put their feet where their faith belong, put their feet where their faith is, and run. Not just see it and go, okay, that's cool, and then start trepidatiously like kind of going, but run through that without thought of the ground, or just go, right? Because that's what God has presented us an opportunity, and we're going to go through it, right? And then there's that second group of people that might go, well, I think the rest of the group is going. I got to wait for somebody to tell me to go, and I guess and they might look around like, wow, look at the wall, look at the water, honey. Look at holy cow, this is very interesting. And they just kind of they go wherever the others go with them, right? But then there's that third group of those that are really just trepidatious, like, well, hang on, let's get not too excited. There's no paved road in that partition. There's no, what can we do, right? Like, what if and they kind of doctrinalize or spiritualize their way out of, and criticize their way out of activity and just get pummeled over. But more importantly, they pull the rest of the group back, right? Like we're we've got a family, 4 kids. It's not that many, but we still got 4 kids. And one of the things I'm constantly, reminding my children about is stay together, right? Stay together. If you separate, then the rest of us have to slow down and wait for you and help you come through. Well, when the children of Israel are at the Red Sea and the sea's parted, they wanted to go through it, but I don't know. I can only imagine those that may have sat back and went, well, wait a minute, is that ground really dry? I mean, are we just going to go in there? Like, what's going on? And may have lingered back a little bit, because the scriptures tell us that when the when Pharaoh's army came into the water, he closed the water and collapsed the water on the Egyptian soldiers, and they were drowned and they were gone, right? Swept them away. Well, I wonder if there were any that lingered back, right, and decided to just not really go that, because they were trepidatious about it, or they weren't really sure how this whole water thing worked, or whether or not it was. We don't need to be like that. We need to see the opportunity, put our feet where our faith are. We need to see the opportunity, put our feet where our faith are, and run, because otherwise there's going to be different definitions that fill that hole, and other restrictions that help themselves, right? There are other, we're not the only ones in the country. There are other forces that need to go, that are trying to keep those restrictions high. And when there's a hole, there's a vacuum. And where there's a vacuum, all it needs is activity, right? And so those who are people of biblically centered faith have a responsibility to make sure that that hole is filled with righteous leadership and righteous activity, righteous protection. So what does that allow us to do? It allows us to bring the Pledge of Allegiance back, prayers back into school, hymns at school, prayers and the Pledge of Allegiance in anywhere there is a public gathering, right? So the ability for you to say, well, wait a second, like we have a town hall, we have a city council, we have a mayor's meeting, we have school, just a classroom. And we have the ability to say, hey guys, well, we're going to pray. You don't have to pray with us if you don't want to. If you don't want to participate, you're not going to be docked down for it, or you're not going to get graded low or anything like that. But those who want to participate in this prayer, we're gonna have a prayer. Maybe we found out in a classroom that somebody's mom's sick, or maybe they're sick. Maybe we have so therefore we could just pray for them immediately and not have to worry about that expression of without worry about reprisals in any way. So we have the opportunity to fill that gap. We have the opportunity to bring God into the public schools, or into public places. Now we have the ability to make those places holy, right? Instead of trying to find places that are holy and standing in them. There are scriptures all over the Old and New Testament that talk about standing in holy places, and I like them, but I think they're used improperly, because if you seek for only holy places and you don't make the places that you are holy, right, then you end up just running away from everything and everybody, right? There's no places for you to be. You run out of places to go, right? But if you make the places that you are holy, then the places that you stand are holy, right? And so we have the ability right now to make the place that we stand a holy place by inviting God into that place. And again, you don't have to do it in a way that forces everybody to participate. That's where it's wrong, right? That's where coercion laws, coercion protections against reprisal come in. That's where you become an enemy. But the ability to say, hey, you know what? Let's have a prayer before we start. You guys okay with a prayer? Let's have a prayer. Okay, good. Or you found out about something, or something. Maybe something's difficult. Maybe you have a difficult decision, and like Ben Franklin, who just says, you know what? Let's invite God into this decision and see what happens. Or maybe we should have before our school board meetings or our city town councils begin, we have a sermon. We have a scripture study. How about that? We invite scripture into our decisions. Maybe we quote scripture for the decisions that we make, in our arguments. Maybe we go, hey guys, did you realize that this is the way that God had intended for us to form these governments? Because these governments that we have, including our policies, our policies can be based on wise decisions that are based out of the same type of scriptures that we're using. At least we can go that far, right? Whereas before that would just be, unwelcome. Now it is. Now it's welcome, right? Now it's welcome. And so we have the ability to just do so much more there. So let's continue on. We got a couple more minutes of Shackelford with Grow Leadership here.
I really believe this, as somebody who's been doing this for 34 years. We're winning these cases, but this is just the beginning. So God is doing this dramatic thing right now. He is massively increasing protections for religious freedom at a time when things are really dark. And I don't know why God's doing this. I hope it's for a revival. It could be just because we need the protection because it's getting so hostile. But the point is, people need to know that, what a disgrace it would be if God opened up all this freedom for us and then we just sit back and do nothing with it. And so that's sort of the good news is God's done the work. We just need to follow him through the hole he just blew open. And we need to restore faith in every community. Everywhere that crosses went down, in every little community, they need to go
Let's
back
pause there
up.
a second. Let's skip ahead actually to 1807, because I think we're getting 5's fine.
Good example, right? I mean, this is not only the school district that did this. Their lawyers
stop for a second.
thought it was
So
okay to fire Coach Kennedy for
how the Supreme Court case had, like, what happened with Coach Kennedy, like how he was restricted, right? And so he's expressing how, and I'll sum it up. It's fine. How Coach Kennedy was, the legal team that was like the lawyers and the school district and all that other stuff, they were totally okay with firing, Coach Kennedy. And the concern was he's out there kneeling, and even again, this is a school district. It's a very powerful thing with a lot of people. Added up, it's a lot. Even and they've been fighting this case for 7 years. And so this thing was, supported by judge after judge after judge for, in several district courts, right? Or in several courts, however the appellate system works. But he was talking about, the concern was Coach Kennedy is kneeling. Somebody else may see him and then be inspired to pray. And we don't want that. Right? Like, that was the argument for firing him and maintaining that case, and the judges in the district court saying, yeah, absolutely, we don't want that in our school systems. We don't want people being inspired to pray. We don't want people being inspired to pray. Just absorb that for a second, guys. This is where we've been for 50 years. This is the world that we've been living in for 50 years. Schools and our public places don't want people to be inspired to pray. Let's listen to that clip, actually.
Going to a knee and saying a prayer. He didn't tell any students to go with him. He didn't do anything. What they said is some student across the lawn might see him. And if they see him, they might feel encouraged to pray. And that would be a violation of the Constitution. It's like, well, I guess it would have been no problem if he'd have put on a dress or, done anything else. That's not a problem. But if he prays, we can't allow that. Now, he had every right as a citizen to pray. And again, the lawyers thought this was okay. The school districts thought it was okay. The judges out in the Ninth Circuit thought it was okay. So you can see how people have been really trained for 50 years to keep their faith to themselves. And I think, Chris, this is the way the enemy always works.
Right.
Fear and lies. And that's what this is. If he can get us to censor ourselves, then he's won.
Wow.
And it's just a matter of us now. God just said, hey, this is all overturned. 7,000 citations, all overturned. Now it's just a matter of every church in their own community saying, why don't we have prayer at the school board meeting? Why don't we have prayer at the city council? It's all legal. If you're not doing it, it's because you don't want to have prayer.
Let's bust that, right?
And
if you're not doing it, it's because you don't want it, right? If you're not doing it, it's because, and again, this is a 50-year precedent shift, right? This is the environment that we've lived in, of that being ashamed of the gospel is expected, right? I mean, you heard what he said, right? Like, and I said, I primed it before, but you heard what he said, is that the reason why, the argument for firing the guy for Coach Kennedy was because we don't want people to be encouraged to pray. That would be, a violation of the Constitution, which it's not. But that's been, that's been the precedent that's been cited in 200,000 cases. Wow. And now it's gone. So now we have the ability for school boards to say, yeah, actually, we do want to encourage people to pray. Maybe they pray different. Maybe you pray differently than I pray, but we want them to pray. Whether you're evangelical, Protestant, Lutheran, Jehovah's Witness, or Jewish or Muslim, like, we want you to pray. It's okay. Go for it. Help yourself. We want God into our national identity, right? And so, we have the ability to be open now without coercion, be open now with your religion in public places without forcing others to go with you, right? So, later on in the clip here, he talks about the separation of church and state. I really empathize for this guy's job, because it's almost like you gotta redo what a lot of these precedents mean. Church and state, separation of church and state was never really a thing anyway, but I think it's better to hear it from him, because separation of church and state was never in the Constitution. It's something that Thomas Jefferson referred to in a letter once, and that was in reference to the the non-establishment clause, that there's no established church. And I want to have him, we're going to listen to him say it, because I want to actually bring that to something that's very it's very real. Let's go ahead. Let's fast forward to 2228. Yeah, right about there.
Separation of church and state.
Beautiful.
Would you please explain that to all of our listeners who might not know what that really is all about?
Well, number one, it's not in the Constitution.
Exactly.
A lot of people think separation of church and state, the words is in the Constitution. It's not. We have two religion clauses. One is the non-establishment clause. Don't want the establishment of a religion, and then the other is the free exercise clause. Thomas Jefferson, where that phrase came from, is Thomas Jefferson, 10 years after the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was passed, wrote a letter to the Danbury Baptist Association, which was concerned that the government might restrict their free exercise. And he said, no, there's this wall of separation to protect church and state. And what he's talking about there is the institutions of the church and the state, right? That we don't want there to be, a Church of America, and we don't want the government to take over the church and the church to take over the government. But
Right,
almost
let's pause
always
right
where
there.
term...
That's really what we wanted to talk about. This goes back to the what the Connecticut Constitution established. So, Plymouth was a strong melting pot of a lot of different religions, and as early as the 1630s, right? A melting pot of a lot of different religions, from separatists to Puritans to different types of Protestantism, etc. So the Connecticut Constitution establishes this, like, okay, guys, each colony has their own way of living, right? And that's what borders are, and that's why there's a border between my colony and your colony, because in your laws and even in your economy in a lot of different ways, you just kind of have a different way of working, right? And that's based on your biblical principles, the way that you interpret the same Bible that I have, right? You should be able to do that. I should be able to do, have my colony live the way that I want to live. But let's create something that unites us, so that it's not so that we can trade, so that we can help each other, right? Let's talk about how we can still work together and have the same type of law structure. So the Connecticut Constitution, the Flushing Remonstrance, like all those other things, really, there's a bunch of them that happened all from the 1620s all the way through the 1700s, even to the Philadelphia, the Principles of Liberty. I've forgotten the name. But it's basically the Pennsylvania Constitution, 1701. That it refers to how there doesn't need to be an established, a non-establishment clause, right? So that's where the non-establishment clause comes from in the 80s, right? 17. I don't need the date right now, but it's a little late. But you know, that's where all that stuff comes from. So we've always known that we do not want a national church, a national religion. Now, this is very different than the way a lot of even Europe functions today, right? I was speaking with a friend of mine who is one of the leaders in the Conservative Party for the European Union, right? The whole European Union. That's a lot of people. And there was something about Europe that I didn't understand. And he kind of was like, no. You guys do religious liberty very differently than we do. Like, religious freedom is very different because your tithing is all individually. I was like, yeah, like I pay my tithing to my church according to my discretion. What? You know? And he's like, yeah, no. In our, in a lot of European countries, a lot of them, it's part of your taxes. Okay? So you're taxed and then you're tithed in your taxes. And then the government gives it to the church that you're a part of. And then the church, when you don't pay your tithing, if you don't declare anything, your church comes to your door and says, hey, you didn't pay the government the tithing that you owe me. The government then sits between the relationship between the individual and the church. So you're not paying the church directly. You're paying the government, and then the government gives it to the church. Right? It's supposed to be a direct pass-through. Imagine that for a second. Like, what does that do now when a government now wants to absorb principles that churches don't want to absorb? Right? What type of relationship? That is the separation of church and state. Okay? When you say there is a direct relationship between an individual and a church. So how much movement do people really have in Europe between churches? How free are people able to go, hey, I've been growing up Protestant all my life, or I've been growing up Roman Catholic all my life, I've been growing up Irish Catholic all my life. Now I feel inspired to change and to do something else. Because it's no longer just a personal change, but it's also a governmental change. I have to declare now which one it's like, guys, that's the combination of church and state in plenty of other European countries, right? That is not America. And that is fundamentally why America is different and continues to be different. Because the decision about even what church they go to is an inspired decision between the individual and that church, right? That church has to earn that person's inspiration via the Holy Spirit in order for that person to decide to go. And therefore, in order for that person to pay them anything, right? In many countries in Europe, the government sits between them. And so that is still religious, that is the combination. So the separation of that's what this non-establishment clause does, is it creates this big separation between the individual. It says that church is private, right? My friend, he was talking about how, we call the Catholic Church the Big C, right? The Big C as in Catholic. And movement outside or around those things are very difficult because, again, the government collects the taxes, collects the tithing as a tax for every person that the church declares as their member, right? And if you stop declaring that you're a member of a church, then that church goes to you and says, hey, you didn't declare us as a member, therefore you didn't declare, that we were. They come to you like the Gestapo and say, hey, what happened to your tithing dollars? I thought you were coming to us. Oh no. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to go tell the government now. Like, what the, like, what is, like, missionaries, like, holy cow, there's just a whole sea of things that are just ridiculous, right? That is not what America is. And fundamentally, the Americans and America is different, and this is where the power of our nation comes from, is the individual having the ability to decide where their faith sits, right? So again, from the Connecticut Constitution to the Flushing Remonstrance to the Principles of Liberty, just our entire nation is based on an individual communication with God, our divine connection with God at the soul level, right? Souls go to churches, they pay tithing there. They could pay tithing to 2 churches and no government would know. And that's exactly the way that it belongs, right? And so I hope I'm not going on too much. I know it's late, at least it is here. I hope I'm not going on too much, but First Liberty does... So this Lemon case that's changed the way that we looked at religion at all in America and in public places. That is now a let me come back to that point for really quick. So if let's take a look at the European or some European countries and that connection with their tax dollars. I have a note here because I thought it was important to share. So does then, if the government is collecting those taxes for those churches, what is stopping the government from saying, hey, we have values, we have a woke value set, and you churches don't. What's stopping that government from withholding their tithing dollars if that church now no longer preaches what they want them to preach, right? Whether it's about wokeism or about, LGBTQism or about trans activism or about COVID vaccination, right? The government has the ability to control it, right? Especially if that is a worldwide church and those taxes are coming into a European Union. And now that's what my discussion with my friend was about. It's like, well, wait a minute. The European Union doesn't represent any one country. It represents an entire set of countries. And if the taxes are if those tithing dollars are going via the European Union that doesn't represent them, then it's much more subject to value corruption. And now a government that doesn't have a people has the ability to control the church, right? Has the ability to control and coerce that church. I'm not saying that's the way that it works right now. We didn't really get that far into the discussion. But we don't have that in America at all, right? That's a structure in architecture that is active currently, right? So that's what church and state combination looks like, right? We don't have that because we have every capability of being an individual and having an individual associate to a church and have our money go to that church, right? So the rest is cultural. The rest is social. The rest is like, oh, hey, my expression of faith might be so big that it might be offending, your expression of faith. Okay, well, let's work that out. Do we need to create laws? No, right? Express your faith, right? I have faith, you have faith, express your faith around mine, and it's fine. We can both live together expressing our faith together. So there's so it's really, really important. Now, First Liberty, I would highly encourage our viewers, listeners, community to follow what's going on with First Liberty, especially recently, because there hasn't been so much activity with First Liberty right now, with all the wins that they've had and with everything that's been going on. They've been very, very active recently, and they even have a religious liberty and protection kit for churches, councils, just a whole bunch of different things. And this one, I do want to play one more clip. This is the Fox News clip. This has to do with the way that, and I appreciate Kelly Shackelford. I know I keep bringing up Kelly Shackelford because we like we like the work that they're doing there. But this is the way that the Constitution interprets our religious exemptions from things. Okay, so I want you to pay attention because there's some nuances that create distinctions with massive differences. Now, this was a year ago. This is Fox News. Fox is, and I can't remember who it is. I think it's Shannon Bream. I'm not sure. I might be wrong, but because I kind of stopped watching Fox a little while ago. But she was discussing how exciting it is, or brought people on about how exciting it was that vaccinations were now approved by the FDA, and what that meant, and what that meant for there's a clip that we're skipping the Biden stuff, but Biden discussing how he's so excited that the FDA has now approved the vaccinations, and so he's going to encourage all businesses to follow suit as he did, and enforce vaccination mandates, or face legal consequences or some ridiculous, basically bullying them, and you're like, oh my gosh. And I remember being in the middle of that. The company I was working for really foolishly sent out a survey, and they asked and everybody knew what they asked everybody if they should, because they were a company that just had just a little bit over 100 employees, and so they said, well, hey guys, should we enforce the vaccine on ourselves? And it was just like, are you the leader of the company or what? Like, of course everybody is going to go with the flow because it's their job. They're not going to answer honestly, right? Every person was like, like there were so few people that were actually advocating for it, but they were pretty loud. Don't get me wrong, but it was really weird because a lot of the the VPs and the heads were all like advocating for it, don't you know? And so now everybody was like, well, I guess so. And then they filled it out, and it was like, 51%. You're like, really, only 51%, And so this was during that whole employment exodus, or whatever that was, that employment shakeup during COVID, and it was so dumb. But what was interesting is what Kelly Shackelford had to say about the way that the Constitution interprets our religious exemptions. And so let's go ahead and play that clip.
Taking a vaccine, there are even people that'll say, well, the Pope says it's okay to take the vaccine, so that must mean that you're Catholic. You can't say you don't have a religious objection. Oh yes, you do. There's law going back many decades, both federal and statutory law, and even the EEOC, that says no, religious beliefs are that person's beliefs. Whether your pastor has the same beliefs as you, or some denomination or not, it's about your own sincerely held religious beliefs and following those. And so there are protections. They're there in the law. They've been there a long time. And I would just encourage people, make sure and know what their rights are, and do what your conscience or what your faith tells you to do. Don't be bullied into doing something that violates your faith or your conscience or what you feel like you're supposed to do.
Doctor, I want to give you the final word here on.
Okay, so I think that interpretation, it was actually opening to me while I was preparing this this podcast. I found that, and I was like, wow, yeah, I wish I would have known that a long time ago, is that our religious belief from a legal perspective has nothing to do with what the Pope's doing, has nothing to do with what the leadership is doing. It's not like your religious exemption requires your religious leader to say, yes, I approve of it, yes, he doesn't have to have a vaccine, There's nothing to do with that. From a legal perspective, you are protected against the way that you interpret your religious belief, whether it's it's Catholic or Protestant or evangelical or Mormon or Muslim or whatever it is. It has nothing. There's no slip that they send it to your religious, your ecclesiastical endorser that says, hey, does this person have the ability to have a religious exemption, right? or hey, no, your pope says, your church leader says that the vaccines are okay, so no, I know better than you. It's like, no, that's an individual interpretation, right? And there's plenty of precedent and law and a plenty of protection against that. And this was said during COVID, right? So this was exposed during COVID, and so we've been at this for a long time. The podcast is good and long. There, I would encourage you to check out First Liberty. Dinesh, his episode number 595, he goes into a little bit further with Dinesh. We went into the podcast episode with Grow Leader. Again, great institution. I hope they I hope it's okay that we use their clips, because we're talking really about what they had went over there, and then definitely take a look at the First Liberty content. Let's see what we didn't jump into the the postal worker case, which was religious freedom in the workplace. This is huge. Okay, not a whole lot of time to talk about it, but Gerald Groff is a postal worker. He was fired from working from the post office because he really held the Sabbath day to be a very important day for him. Now, Gerald Groff, there's a great video on First Liberty's content. You can jump in there, and I'm gonna try to summarize this story because it's very important, but at the same time, I think we've been going on a little bit. So, Gerald Groff is he's a missionary first. So he's been going on foreign missions, several foreign missions, missions to Africa, missions Europe, like all over the place to preach the gospel. And so he's very devout, and I don't even know what religion he is, but he's a very devout Christian, and he just feels that the Sabbath day is worth stopping and, I don't know, worshiping, resting, doing what God said to do, right? This has been a huge thing in almost any religion that takes the Sabbath day seriously. And so this is not just something for Seventh-day Adventists or devout Christians. This is something that everybody battles on the Sabbath, which is, it's the Sabbath and my work is calling me to go to work, right? And so he decided to work at the post office because they were closed on Sunday. Well, during his tenure, they decided that they were going to do Amazon deliveries and take on Amazon deliveries, and they started delivering on the Sabbath, on Sunday, on his designated day of the Sabbath. And so, it was new for him. It's not like they were doing this before he was hired. And he said, "Hey guys, I'm not come on, I'm not going to work on the Sabbath." Now the thing about it is it's government work. It's federal government work. And so, there's this long process to be fired from something federal. I mean, it's worse than the old VA stuff, right? And so there was this long process, a 7-day suspension, a 14-day suspension, and he kept holding his ground. So there was plenty of opportunity for them to really bully his way through, which they did in a variety of different ways, cornering him, sanctioning him, suspending him in a variety of different ways, withholding pay, like a whole bunch of stuff that was just like really crazy, just to prove the point that you got to work on the Sabbath, and we don't respect the Sabbath for you, and it was just like, oh my gosh. So he loses his job, and he's concerned that having a being fired from federal work is going to affect him, in life. And so he takes it to First Liberty. First Liberty picks it up and says, "Yeah, no, you have protections here. We really have protections here." And so they take the case all the way up to the Supreme Court, years, and it takes years to do. And they find out that they argue the case very well. And ultimately, the argument is that no employee should have to, decide between their faith and their employment. Not in this day and age. Like, not now. I mean, it really shouldn't have been ever, but instead now, and they won in the Supreme Court. Now, I'm not sure which precedent or case, was flipped necessarily, but there was a flip of a 50-year precedent that says employers now have to make reasonable accommodations. They have to look at the religious request as a natural, normal request and seek for accommodations first. They can't let them go, sanction them, etc., because of their religious exercise in the workplace. So that affects a variety of different ways. And again, the way that it was, the way that is looked at is not just, hey, you got to let people go home on Sunday, right? That it's not just that. It's a much wider look at that. And first of all, guys, that's huge. I can't tell you how many Bible studies and Sunday schools and preaching from the pulpit is all about, hey, look, you if you don't like the job, if they force you to work on Sunday, then quit. And then how many exceptions are, we make in our heads because that's the world that we live in. Where else are you going to work, right? And just so it's very interesting. The frame of law that we have has that we've been living in for 50 years has all of these setups that we then either justify our faith, or we justify our fear, or we justify our lack of faith in, and God's opened them up strangely, oddly, this year, within the past 4 months, within the past 12 weeks, right? And it's all happening at the same time. And it's a lot. And so now businesses have to seek that accommodation for religious exemption first. So, I know we have a lot of Muslim friends that I work with in the line of work that I'm in currently, which is mostly remote. But for years it was, hey, right about 4:00 on Friday, some people are going to have to go to at least pray, if not go to temple, right? Or if not, go and do extra things. And so, employers now have to seek accommodation before. And the bar is set so much higher for non-accommodation around that. Whereas before it was just, well, that's what we're doing. I remember one year, we were really struggling. Our family was hit when I was young, right after I came home from, serving a mission. My family was struggling. My father was out of work, oddly, and it was oddly out of work for a while. And so we were like, a job is a job is a job. Let's go get something. And so we pitched in and we started working at the nearby regional grocery store. It was a Meijer, right? So I was like, not Fred Meyer, right? And in Michigan you say Myers, right? Part of working at Myers was you had to work on Sunday. And we said, no, guys, look, I can't ask God for miracles in my life and at the same time be violating what I feel his commandments are, right? What I feel is important to him, So I'm not going to show up on Sunday morning, but if you want to do what you want, put me on the schedule if you want, but I'm not walking in the door on Sunday, And I remember that manager, we kind of came up with nicknames, disrespectful nicknames for him, but because he wasn't a very nice person, or at least he wasn't a very nice manager. He called us up Sunday morning. We're like, nope, sorry, man, I'm at church. Like, I got church responsibilities. And I don't think they let us go. I don't think they ever did. I think we ultimately, I think that Dad got employed because Dad was he was a white collar worker, and this was in 2006, like during the whole automotive kind of crisis and things. And so, we had to, it was a very big struggle to have to deal with, have to go, and there was a lot of bullying. There was a lot of pressure, work on my shift, and you're like, there's other people that'd be willing to do that. There are other people that would be willing to do that. Definitely. There are people that don't see Sunday day as the Sabbath. And so they would be willing to do that. Why me? Like, I'm happy to work extra shifts, double shifts, other shifts on other days. Happy to do it. Double shift on a Friday night. It's okay. Why this day and why me? Why should I have to deal with that? So there's definitely personal experience with that, and that applies in so many workplaces now. And that entire precedent of work before faith, work before God, right? Like, that's absolutely changed the same way that it has in our public environments. So, sweetheart, honey, we're just about ready to go. It's late on our side. Jen is actually falling asleep. It's because of the sound of my voice, isn't it? It is just, I'm sure you've fallen asleep too, right? Well, if you're still awake, you're still for those of us who are still with us, let's say goodbye. So, Jen says goodbye, guys. She's been sitting there working the engineering here, and appreciate you. So, really, really today, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, neighbors, friends, I really hope that God blesses you, your family. May God bless America, and may God bless this American family. So we'll see ya. Thanks a lot.
Show people